Welcome everyone to today's webinar, another in our series of Transparency is the New Green in Product Selection and Specification. And today's webinar is entitled Everything You Always Want to Know About EPDs, but We're Afraid to Ask. So I went with that insinuating title because EPDs is such an exciting topic. We had to use a little bit of a hook to get people to attend, but you're going to be glad you did because I'm going to be sharing with you more information than you could ever possibly have thought you needed to know. However, you're going to walk away from this saying, that is really interesting. Now I understand why EPDs are so complicated. So don't be afraid to ask questions. We've got the questions panel here on the control panel. Type those in. We'll take them at the end of the presentation. Any questions that don't get answered, we'll follow up with email or a call. This is really putting a stake in the ground to begin a pretty significant trend in education, both of manufacturers and building professionals about the creation, the use, and ultimate value of manufacturers creating environmental impact reports for their own use internally, as well as moving the market. So today I'm going to tell you a long story, and we're going to look back historically to see what the state of EPDs were when LEED version 4 announced their use in the Environmental Product Transparency Credit, and how Sustainable Minds got involved in this space and why. And then we're going to dig into the structure, the technical program, ISO 14025, that describes how EPDs ultimately get created. It's a pretty significant process. Lots of folks are involved. ISO 14025 is the standard that prescribes this, and program operators, the organizations that decide to operate environmental product declaration programs, must function and operate according to that standard. It's all written out, but yet you're going to be surprised at how much variability there is all along the way. We're going to focus in on ultimately that EPD, that thing that manufacturers make that to put in front of people who are considering their products, that market-facing document, how that in and of itself is quite prescribed in terms of what goes into it. And then we're going to talk about how Sustainable Minds has addressed what we have learned from essentially now 6 years of research and participation in the industry, and the work that continues to be done and will need to be done over the next decades, if in fact all of us involved in the building construction industry and all the various roles that we play who care about improving the environmental performance of buildings to diminish the impact on the built environment, the natural environment, and human health. There's a lot of work to be done, and this technical program, this process, is at the core of how change can actually happen. And so that's ultimately, you're going to see why to specify products with EPDs, because manufacturers who have gotten started should be rewarded for having gotten started. And again, we're going to kind of lay out the roadmap for the challenges that exist and what lays ahead. And again, as I mentioned, this will be the first in many webinars from Sustainable Minds and also through the Program Operator Consortium, who collectively are committed to making this change happen. So let me set the stage here. Sustainable Minds works with building product manufacturers, and we also work with, in terms of education, presentations, and just straight up research to understand essentially both sides of the use case. What are the challenges and the uses for manufacturers to produce LCAs and EPDs? And what are the challenges and uses for building professionals in consuming and utilizing this information? So fundamentally, what's going on? Starting out with the premise that lifecycle assessment is a tool that provides manufacturers visibility into the lifecycle impacts of their products. Doing LCA is very complicated. It's also complex. So they're two different things, but in this case, it's both. It's risky for manufacturers to disclose certain aspects of the way they make products for a variety of reasons. It's extremely expensive for them to do. It involves a lot of people's time inside the organization. And then if they are hiring consultants or even acquiring those skills internally, again, very expensive and time consuming. But that said, LCAs are the tool to identify where in a product's life cycle the impacts are occurring and how to then make decisions, use new strategies to drive performance improvements. And those performance improvements are the things that actually do drive product innovation and help manufacturers bring new differentiated products to the market and have new and differentiated stories to tell. So today, manufacturers are being led through the EPD process by LCA providers and practitioners and program operators. So those folks are very interested in the LCA technical standards, the LCA process, the lifecycle assessment data and results. And while the LCA providers, the really good ones, are in there with the manufacturers to then take those results and analyze those results, interpret what they mean, and provide strategies, collaborate with the manufacturer's team to really look at where performance improvements can be gained, what can be done, and set the manufacturer forward on what is a path of continual improvement. Most manufacturers are, but have not been looking at environmental performance as a pathway forward to drive innovation and improvement. And today's EPDs, because they're created by LCA providers and according to the rules of program operators, and again, the people who are not making decisions about products, but the people who are delivering the technical services, it's not surprising when you think about it this way, why today's EPDs still don't deliver understandable and meaningful information about the manufacturer's products, what they're doing to improve, what do the environmental impact indicators mean, how is that delivered? It's still not being delivered today in a way that helps regular people, building professionals, make decisions about products. And now what we're hearing, and the data will show, we'll be producing another trend report at the end of 2018, there's been a significant slowdown in the creation of EPDs compared to 2017, but I might call 2017 a banner year for EPD production. But there's kind of a growing skepticism within manufacturers because of what we just covered. They are complicated, complex, risky, and expensive, and they still are not able to necessarily connect them directly to winning bids, winning projects. And yes, there's some different things happening now. California legislation, owners and contractors who are requiring products with disclosures, but we're really still in the early stages of that. And so manufacturers who are looking at their bottom line year over year are taking a hard look at the spend on EPDs. And I just heard just this week This is not the first time I've heard it, but just this week from a senior decision maker in a major manufacturer said, we've been told by our building professional customers that we don't read them, they just put them in the file. And they think they can still win the bid without the EPD. So, with all things considered, it's a big decision for a manufacturer to make that commitment. So the importance of specifying products from manufacturers who have created EPDs is paramount because if it is our intent to actually reduce the impacts of the built environment on the natural environment and human health, manufacturers must use LCA to understand how to do that. But if manufacturers believe the market is only asking for EPDs to check a box and they don't win business, they're going to stop doing it. And it's looking a lot like rewarding building owners with green building rating system credits is not going to be enough of an incentive longer term to continue to incentivize manufacturers to invest in these types of disclosures. What needs to happen is that the market must demand products that actually are better from an environmental performance perspective and not just a document that a regular person can't tell one way or another if something's better or worse or the same as 20 years ago. Manufacturers should be continually improving. And ultimately, their customer-facing representatives should be able to explain about the manufacturer's commitment to environmental performance improvement, what they're doing to improve, as that's just part of explaining their products, and they're required to understand every other aspect of their product to get them specified and sold. So why should being able to explain the environmental performance of their products be any different? So when we talk to manufacturers about EPDs and environmental performance, we frame it as environmental performance is the latest performance criteria that sits alongside functional performance, aesthetics, safety. Now, environmental performance is another performance criteria that people use to make trade-offs. People talking to customers should be just as versed about the performance, the environmental performance attributes of their products as any other aspect of their products. So bottom line, manufacturers creating EPDs, whatever their motivation, whatever the quality, they've gotten started. And we want to encourage those people and continue to encourage them to make better products by doing two things: hold their feet to the fire, make them explain what they're actually doing to make better products and ultimately better reports, and then specify their products and make sure their products actually get purchased and installed in the building. And that's how we're going to drive the change in the market that we all want to see. So with that, let's talk about the nitty-gritty content of the subject matter today. And we pose this relatively provocative question about the use of EPDs. And, most people we've spoken to in the building and construction profession are really not able or have not been able to use EPDs on a regular basis to make informed decisions. And typically when we ask that question, people are kind of sheepish about it. Well, no, not really. And the fact is that it's not you, it's us. And us, and I'm grouping Sustainable Minds in the us, are the program operators. We are the ones who run environmental product declaration programs by following the ISO 14025 standard, which clearly lays out the principles and procedures for developing Type 3 environmental declarations. So that's actually what they're called. EPD is a colloquialism. Environmental product declaration. They don't even use the word product in the actual term, Type 3 environmental declaration. But we're the ones who are responsible for executing on this technical standard. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sustainable Minds' journey, how we became a program operator. But when I show you, there are currently 9 program operators running EPD programs in North America. It's a mixed bag, really, of types of organizations who have chosen to become program operators. So to become a program operator, ISO 14025 only requires the organization running a program to publish their operating procedures. That's it. To write a document about how you are executing on the requirements of running a Type 3 environmental declaration program and make it public. And then anybody can be a program operator. I was kind of surprised when I first learned that. So, it's not surprising that organizations like ASTM, CSA Group in Canada, NSF, UL, SCS, who already are in the standards development business, said, sure, we'll add program operation to our business. We're already working with groups of manufacturers to write technical standards, functional performance standards for products across categories. This is just another technical standard for product categories that will involve pretty much the same people to make decisions about how, in this case, environmental performance will be measured and reported. But because most of the manufacturers who participate in creating technical standards, functional performance technical standards, are often, for the most part, really expert in that particular technology, product technology. They're good at creating technical performance standards, but those same people are often the ones who will participate in the product category rule standard development process, and it's oftentimes the first they've ever heard of life cycle assessment. So you're getting folks in a room or across the country on phone calls to make technical decisions about things that they're not necessarily knowledgeable about, which is why they rely heavily on the life cycle assessment and the program operation folks who are engaged in that process. Again, remembering that those folks know a lot about LCA and ISO 14025 and other technical standards, but not so much about necessarily the strategy for how those manufacturers make products in that particular category and where there are innovation opportunities that can be discovered from evaluating environmental performance. So we are kind of a unique kind of company that decided to become a program operator, and I'm going to tell you that story. There was a trend some years ago where it looked like industry trade associations thought they should become program operators and create PCRs and EPDs for the manufacturers in their industry. And then it turned out that it's a lot of technical knowledge and it's a lot of work, and really the folks that run industry groups don't have the bandwidth to take on the responsibility of running a technical standards program in addition to everything else that they do, very often on a shoestring. And so that trend, thankfully, has dissipated because it simply would have contributed to the ongoing proliferation of program operators. And we're going to talk about is why a proliferation of program operators is really at the core of the problem, because each program operator, again, gets to run their own technical program according to the broad rules of 14025. But as everybody knows, the devil's in the details, right? Now, I will say that NRMCA has done a really, really good job of being a program operator in the ready-mix concrete industry. They are committed to it. They staff it. They're knowledgeable about it. And concrete is kind of its own animal, where every formulation ends up with its own EPD. And so I thank NRMCA for taking on that sector. And but moving forward, let's continue to talk about, again, with a range of different program operators in North America, there's a whole bunch of things that people can do differently. Now, in contrast, in Europe, there's been traditionally one program operator per country. So anytime a manufacturer who has manufacturing facilities in a particular country in Europe goes to the one program operator who's doing all of the PCRs and EPDs in that country, although the challenges in Europe have been that's really challenging for a manufacturer who has manufacturing facilities in many countries in Europe. And so that's why there's been the creation of EN 15804, which is the technical standard for how to do LCA on building construction products. And then recently the revisions to ISO 21930, again, to standardize the way LCA and environmental reporting gets done across Europe, and those technical standards being integrated into each of the national program operators programs. I heard recently, though, that that's changing. There are several program operators in Germany now, and so that'll be interesting to look into. So Sustainable Mines is a software company. We're a provider of environmental product transparency applications and services in the cloud. We founded the company. I founded the company in 2007. Our mission has never changed, which is to operationalize environmental performance in mainstream product development and manufacturing to drive revenue and growth through greener product innovation. So that's a mouthful. I've probably said that 1,050 times. But it's never changed, right? It's all about helping manufacturers understand the value of analyzing the life cycle impacts of their products. And our very first product that we brought to market in 2010 is a streamlined eco-design and LCA software tool delivered in the cloud for product development teams to model product concepts against whether it's an existing product or the product concept they want to put forward, to really understand where in the life cycle the impacts are occurring today, where they could be occurring with changes across the life cycle, to help them make better informed decisions about products to bring to market. So we've been in the eco-design and LCA business since 2007, and today that tool has been adopted and utilized both in industry and largely in higher education all around the world. Business schools, every kind of engineering, design, in over 90 countries, which I can tell you no one is more surprised about that than me. But what it says is that things are changing. 10 years ago, manufacturers really not that interested in understanding how to design greener products. There's been this kind of slow growth trend until a decade later, Clearly, there isn't a manufacturing company anywhere in the world who hasn't either started to consider the environmental implications of their business or has done a lot to consider it, but it's no longer, not an option. This gives you a little bit of a timeline. So we launched our eco concept and LCA software in 2010. In 2012, LEED announced LEED version 4 with product transparency as one of the cornerstone concepts for LEED version 4, saying, all right, we said to the technical community, help us select some scientific method for manufacturers to actually tell us, building professionals, about the environmental performance of their products. Technical community said, great, there's ISO 14025, you can create EPDs. Great. That went into the MR tag and became part of the credit, and actually became the foundation for the EPD credit. So this is a little known story, but our LCA technical expert, Joop Meyer, was on that MR tag, that first one, and Joop helped make that decision and inform LEED, the folks at LEED, yes, this should be part of the credit. So then after that happened and this was announced, I literally said to Joop, great, okay, what's an EPD? And I really didn't know. And so he explained to me what an EPD was in layman's terms. I was just a layman. I didn't know what it was. And the conversation had a lot of exclamatory comments like, really? It's done like that? No way. How does that happen? It's still being done like that? How does somebody use that? And, honestly, that ultimate investigation, which I'm going to show you, because also a little known fact, I'm a graphic designer by training, and many years ago, I actually used to design sweets catalogs, printed sweets catalogs for manufacturers. So to me, as a graphic designer, an EPD is just another kind of brochure. And in that conversation to Joop, I said, well, Joop, it's just another brochure. So what's in it that makes it so special? So I'm going to show you that investigation. This was it led us to creating the transparency report, which is our brand of EPD. Then we understood that in order to actually influence the industry to create better reports, we needed to become a program operator. So in 2014, we wrote our operating document and created our own technical program that Joop was the primary author of. So Joop is a practitioner in Europe as well as in North America. There was the beginning of the trend to create two-part PCRs in Europe. And so we adopted that trend and wrote the very first two-part PCR program for North America from the ground up using EN 15804 and the two-part process that was happening in Europe, but utilizing all North American technical standards and procedures, and also, of course, using ISO 14040 and 44, the technical standards for how LCA would be done. And from there on, we have continued to keep that technical program up to date with a new Part A every year to keep current with standards and trends that are happening around the world. We have a persistent technical advisory board of some of the leading LCA practitioners in North America, as well as representatives from a number of the other program operators to contribute to creating a standardized, more consistent, more collaborative technical program. In 2015, we became a founding member of the Program Operator Consortium, where a group of program operators came together to pursue exactly this challenge of how do we simplify and standardize the way PCRs and EPDs get done in North America. We had significant impact both inside those organizations and in the industry. And we're going to talk at the end about how the Program Operator Consortium has evolved and how today it's an open organization inclusive of everyone involved in the process of environmental performance reporting, creation, and use. We're going to invite everybody to participate to really create an industry movement to drive the change that we're looking for. So a last look at, again, Sustainable Minds. We're a little bit different than some of the other folks who are PCRs. We became a program operator for the purpose of delivering better EPDs. That's why we became a program operator. We also do LCA project delivery for key accounts because that keeps us knowledgeable about what's actually happening in the industry in terms of using the technical standards that we ourselves create, but also using the technical standards from other program operators. So really doing LCA for us is R&D into our technical program. And of course, we have our software tool. We don't do LCA verification and we don't do EPD verification. And that was a decision we made right at the beginning because, again, our intent is to deliver better reports. So we want everybody in the business of doing LCA and EPDs to be able to deliver better reports. And so we don't want to compete with the people that are in our industry. These folks who create and deliver technical standards, they're in the business of doing verification and certification. That's really how they make their money. So we want to collaborate with them. We want to make it possible for every LCA provider to offer their manufacturing client a new alternative. They can have a traditional EPD that's a PDF that's focused largely, if not almost entirely, on data, or they can have a transparency report, which we refer to as really a next generation EPD that really looks at what manufacturers are doing to make improvements, and we simplify the delivery of that information to help building professionals understand what that data means and get visibility into what the manufacturer is doing to improve. So at the end of 2017, we produced a trend report. Sustainable Minds also really acts as industry analysts. We watch and track all of the activity in every technical program from every program operator. And by the way, we watch and track all of the activity in the material ingredient disclosure community as well. That's a separate webinar. But at the end of 2017, what we learned was that in total, there were 1,225 EPDs from all those North American program operators across 19 CSI divisions. And what's important when you look at this table is one, to say, wow, that's a lot of EPDs given the number of, given the complexity and challenges for creating EPDs. But what's interesting is that 19 CSI divisions is a lot. I mean, that's pretty good coverage. That's a heck of a great start to be specifying products for a building where a lot of the products that get specified could have EPDs. Now, it's not surprising that a couple of these divisions, concrete and finishes, we already talked about concrete, why there are so many EPDs, because those get done at the formulation level, and there are a lot of manufacturers. In finishes, also not surprising, the numbers are big. There's a lot of manufacturers. Finishes is a pretty broad category. There's a lot of manufacturers. They've made a lot of EPDs, but look at the number of PCRs. There's a lot of rule books for products in the finishes division. So again, not surprising. It's a big division, a lot of sections. There still isn't a PCR per section. Several PCRs cover more than one section. In fact, what we found is that most PCRs are not done according to CSI division or section. And oftentimes they'll include products, because they're done at the category level, that are found in different CSI divisions, as surprising as that may be. So we're going to hold that thought about the number of PCRs in a particular division. That's driving the creation of EPDs, and ultimately, again, why EPDs are so different. But, a lot of EPDs have been created. So let's take a quick look at the ISO 14025 standard. It hasn't changed in a long time. This is the forward, and right up front, in the forward, in the introduction, it says that PCRs are encouraged between programs to meet the principle of comparability. So that means, the intent of 14025 was for PCR programs to be similar and harmonized, foreseeing the complexity and problems if they are not. And again, going further to say mutual recognition of rules. If we're not going to have one technical program, then at least let's see if we can adopt and use other people's rules and keep things happening pretty smoothly. It also says that it is important to consider the information needs of different purchasers or user groups. So, that's pretty sensible advice. It's kind of, marketing 101. Consider the audience and then speak to them in terms and language that they understand. And again, they reinforce that by saying those responsible for developing Type 3 environmental declarations and programs will need to pay due attention to the level of awareness of the target audience. So again, speak to the audience and give them the information they need in a way that they can consume it. The objective for creating a Type 3 environmental declaration, at the end of the day, the reason for doing all that, the complexity, the cost, the risk, the intent is to then encourage the demand and supply of those products that actually do cause less stress on the environment through communicating verifiable and accurate information that isn't misleading, that will stimulate the potential for market-driven continuous improvement. It says it right there in the standard. So the way to do that is to provide LCA-based and additional information on environmental aspects, to then assist purchasers and users to make informed comparisons between products, even though, and this is a subject of countless hours of debate in the LCA community, the difference between providing information that will help people make informed comparative decisions without the manufacturer making a comparative assertion. So a manufacturer in an EPD cannot use the data, the LCA results, to say, look at my LCA results compared to my competitor's LCA results. Look, see how mine are better. They can't use the EPD for that purpose, but they can use the EPD to provide information about how they make their products, use those technical results to confirm the positive steps that they're taking to make their products, and therefore make a well-informed business case for people to be able to make comparisons. I mean, that's how sales gets done. That is, again, sales and marketing. That's what's in brochures. That's what's on websites. You take the technical information, you put it in a story, and you help people understand why your products are better than someone else's. And that's how you win business. Anyway, so back to the story with Yoop in 2012. What's an EPD? Isn't it just a brochure? So we set about to do a big research project because we wanted to understand what the state of EPDs were. And so we looked at about 40 different EPDs from around the world, again, mostly from Europe, because that's where more EPD development was happening. And so we looked at some EPDs that were 40 pages long. We looked at some that were shorter and a bunch that were in between. We looked at documents that were not EPDs, but were serving the intended purpose of EPDs, and ultimately put together a presentation where we showed the analysis of these 5 EPDs, and one not being an EPD. So I was particularly intrigued by this statement at the time as well, because like you, again, me as a novice saying, isn't it just a brochure? Well, I should be able to make comparative decisions, but then finding that every EPD is required to have this disclaimer. No, you can't make comparative decisions, but actually you should be able to make decisions based on comparability without the manufacturer making comparative assertions. So, it's tricky, the language, but I was pretty interested in the fact that the document has to have this disclaimer. So the manufacturer is doing all that work to create this information, and yet has to warn you, the user, don't use it to make comparative decisions. I mean, it honestly doesn't make sense to me either. So here's how we did the research study. We read ISO 14025. ISO 14025 prescribes the type of content that needs to go into a Type 3 environmental declaration so that it is actually a Type 3 environmental declaration. So that's what makes it special. That's what makes it an EPD, that it has to include certain types of information, and then other types of information are optional. And then, of course, the LCA needs to be verified and the EPD needs to be verified. But that is at the core of what we learned from this analysis. So the LCA results, there's 4 main categories: LCA results, then whatever is relevant in terms of variation that drives performance, other environmental performance data not covered by the LCA, and obviously we're paraphrasing, but essentially whatever else you want to tell as long as it's relevant and it's product related. And so in 14025, there's a couple of pages that gets more specific. So what we did is we created kind of an analysis tool and created this color coding, broke it down a little bit more. So again, taking the language from 14025, it requires a product description, LCA results, relevant in terms of variation, other environmental performance, whatever else you want to tell, and issuing party-related references. So 1, 2, and 3, and 6 are required. That's required content. 4 and 5, optional. You don't have to have it. 1, 2, and 3, you must have. 6, you must have. So that's all the LCA. You have to name the product. You have to say who did the LCA and who did the valuation, who wrote the PCR. Oftentimes you'll see a couple of pages in an EPD, or at least one full page dedicated to that. And then again, all the stuff that actually would tell the story about what a manufacturer is doing to improve and what the LCA results mean is optional. You can have it, you don't have to have it. So this is a quick result. What I'm showing you quickly is here's the EPD. Here's the analysis. Remember, teal and orange are optional. So if you look through this early EPD from Armstrong, which by the way was a fantastic EPD, I have to really hand it to them. But nonetheless, here it is. Fair amount of teal, not much orange. Here's another one from Hans Grohe. This was a particularly long one. No orange. Remember, orange is whatever else you want to tell as long as it's relevant. So that's really anything that has to do with the performance of the product. And this is, remember, anything other than LCA. So, no orange, a little bit of teal, tons and tons of the LCA stuff and the variations. Here's ones that were shorter. We looked at the time UL was doing what they called a transparency brief because their EPDs also were long. And so they realized, hey, we need to do something shorter. And so it was 2 pages, but in fact, it wasn't an EPD. And so a manufacturer then had to manage 2 documents, the brief and the EPD. And finally, we did find one EPD from Rockphone in the Netherlands that was only 3 pages. Here was this Herman Miller chair, by the way. It wasn't an EPD, but it was serving that purpose. And this Rockphone EPD was 3 pages. It was an EPD. It was verified. It has some of the other environmental performance information. No other product-related information, but nonetheless, it's 3 pages. So our research findings essentially said, look, EPDs are too long, mostly. They're not useful to make decisions. The ones that are too short are not EPDs, except we did find one. They're mostly too technical. They have too much detail in LCA results. If they do add other environmental data, oftentimes that environmental data was confusing because it was provided as tabular data, so not well explained. And the ones that did have marketing information or technical information, actually what we're saying is there wasn't enough marketing information, or if there was, the technical information distracted from the marketing information because the marketing information, and marketing meaning everything else about the product, was either at the end or kind of buried. And of course, they're not comparable. So we came away thinking, how will an architect, builder, contractor ever use EPDs to make a purchase decision? So our research conclusions were, look, if LEED is going to be successful, if LEED version 4 is going to be successful, the way PCRs and EPDs got created in 2012, 2013, and for the foreseeable future, we're never going to be able to keep up with the demand for transparency that they were hoping to create. So I'm going to talk about what has changed since then, but what I'm also going to tell you up front is actually not a lot. Not a lot has changed. And we're going to go into the reasons why, and that's why today, now, starting now, change has to happen, and everybody has to be involved in making the change. And that change starts with being educated about the process and what's hard to change and what might not be so hard to change and what you can do to be part of that change. So what we said, what we could do at the end of this research was use better design to make complicated things clear, provide real advantages over the way things were being done. So at the end of the day, focus on the benefits the EPD provides to the stakeholders and that it's all about the report. Making a better report is where the rubber hits the road. It's the thing that people use to make decisions. So the PCR and the LCA are just a means to an end, right? It's just the necessary evils you have to do to get to the report. So the first thing we did, and just to kind of pick up the pace, we also outlined a research agenda that we'll continue to work on. The problem never gets solved, how much LCA content should be in an EPD, what happens when the international standards change, what are the challenges for LCA providers and manufacturers who are doing their own LCAs to continue to keep up as technical programs change. Why, if technical programs change and things are complex, why that's going to still keep the price high for LCA, getting LCA consulting and participating in PCR programs, and obviously the cost for verification. If every time an LCA and an EPD comes across a verifier's desk, and they're always different, they have to dig into the PCR, they have to read the LCA, get up to speed every single time instead of it being standardized. And obviously the ongoing research of what content is useful to AEC professionals to make better informed decisions, and then how are you going to use that information? And finally, how is that information going to get used in whole building LCA, again, which is a whole other topic. So our response to that research back in 2012, 2013 was to create our brand of EPD. We called it a transparency report because ISO 14025, again, there it is, the front page, pulls out a special note that says program operators can call their declarations anything they want. They don't have to be called EPDs. In fact, they're not even called EPDs in 14025. So we made the decision to call ours a transparency report, our brand of EPD, because we wanted to indicate to the market there was something different about it. And also knowing that over time, we would want to include in that report other kinds of environmental information because we're allowed to. And so by calling it an EPD, there's already an association or knowledge in the market of what an EPD is, and we don't want this to be that. And we've already done that. We've already integrated material ingredient disclosure reporting into the transparency report, and I'll show what that looks like. But the transparency report, we said, we're going to do this, and we're going to do it in 3 pages. And because we'd seen a 3-page EPD, we're going to do it in 3 pages, and we're even going to make page 3 optional, because this is where the optional content goes. So page 1 has everything somebody would need to know about the product, technical performance, access to the guide specifications, access to the product pages on the manufacturer's website. Page 2 has all the LCA results required by ISO 14025. We've simplified the display of that information, and importantly, we've included the interpretation extracted from the LCA report, but simplified to explain, well, what do the results mean? Where are the greatest impacts happening? And here we actually have started to tell the manufacturer's story of what they're doing to improve. And then on page 3, again, optional, the manufacturer can talk about, and using any combination of pictures and text, what they're doing in any or all of the life cycle stages that are reported here on page 2, about what they're doing that is impacting or improving the life cycle impacts of their products by life cycle stage. Now, I mentioned in the invite, there's new terms like circularity and embodied carbon that are really getting people excited about environmental reporting. But it's important that people understand these are not new ideas, and the information is available and can be made available through well-designed and considered EPDs. So circularity refers to strategies that manufacturers use, like recycled content, take-back programs, things that repurpose and reuse from cradle to cradle to drive performance improvements. But what an LCA does is it takes the energy flows, the waste flows inside a manufacturing organization and interprets what the manufacturer is doing into environmental impacts. At the end of the day, a manufacturer can be utilizing a number of strategies that fall under the category of circularity, but without actually measuring through the use of LCA if those strategies are driving meaningful performance improvement. They could be saving a lot of money. That's great. And yes, saving money, being more efficient, of course, top of the list. However, if the intent is to be able to tell an environmental story, then it's important to really understand if those strategies are driving meaningful improvements, or if it's really taking care of something that's little compared to the thing that's creating the greatest impacts that they're doing nothing about because either they can't or they don't want to. Embodied carbon is right here. That's the global warming potential score. And again, if people want to know about the embodied carbon in a manufacturer's product, there's the LCA result. This story can be expanded. This story can be told in an EPD about what's happening in the way a manufacturer makes its products that's contributing to the global warming potential of the product. All that can be right in there. ISO 14025 provides for that, and so do our transparency reports, because they are designed to include all that content that makes the results meaningful and done in a standardized way. I'm going to close off by foreshadowing what's coming in the next weeks and in the next webinar. If you have the opportunity to go visit the PCR Catalog that we put together, we started in 2015, so that, again, we're really focusing on the PCR. That's the root cause. That's where things get started. What does the PCR say about how LCA gets done? And the PCR is what describes exactly what goes into the EPD. So we started tracking every PCR and organized it by CSI Master Format Division, who's the program operator, the validity dates. And on our next webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to look at, and I'm just going to fast forward here, we are going to look at the EPDs of today. So what's changed between when we started and where we are today. And we're going to break down one division. We're going to look at, there's a bunch of PCRs in this one division from several different program operators. We're going to look at the structure of those PCRs, and we're going to look at the EPDs, what's in them. How have those manufacturers, guided by their LCA providers and the program operator, how have they implemented their EPDs, and how might a building professional use them to make better informed decisions about products. So I invite everyone on the call to please use the Transparency Catalog to find manufacturers who have EPDs. If you're coming to Greenbuild next week, come visit us. We are actually just next to the USGBC booth in booth 10 2015. We have a really exciting new release of the catalog coming out next week in time for Greenbuild, where there's going to be more focus on EPDs, so thus why the education is important. And your action items, in addition to using the catalog to find manufacturers with EPDs, is to be a proponent of simplification and standardization. Manufacturers, if you're going to participate in creating a new or renewing an existing PCR that's expired, or you've got EPDs to do, I invite you to talk with us, include Sustainable Minds in your research and in your RFP process. If you're an industry organization starting an industry-wide EPD project, again, the same invitation. In the next webinar, we will be talking about our benchmarking guidance and how we've created benchmarking guidance to help industry groups create industry-wide EPDs that can be used as category benchmarks to which product-specific EPDs can be compared. And then for all of you design professionals on the call, your takeaway from this webinar should be, if you're looking for products with EPDs, ask the rep, what's your company's commitment to transparency, to environmental performance improvement? What kinds of things have you implemented in your manufacturing through end-of-life processes to drive improvement? And if you are using EPDs today to check a box, let the manufacturer know at least that you are specifying their products because they have EPDs. Let them know. They need to know, they need that support, they need that encouragement. And then I'm asking you to go further. Hold their feet to the fire. Find out, what are you actually doing to make higher performing products? Because you want to build a higher performing building. So you want to make sure you're picking the best products that hit every single criteria for your selection process and your specification process, but that environmental performance becomes more than a check the box criteria. So thank you for attending today. There are a couple questions. We'll follow up with you directly. The webinar has been recorded. We'll be sending you a link to the recording. If you'd like a PDF of the deck, we'll let you know how to get that as well. So looking forward to seeing you at Greenbuild. Feel free to come to the webinar in 2 weeks, and we look forward to engaging with each and every one of you. So have a great day.